Hi, I'm Andrew, the Young Adult and Media Librarian at North Brunswick Public Library. And at the North Brunswick Public Library, we have a good collections of graphic novels. We actually have four collections. We have the children's and the adults, and then there's my domains, the young adult and the young adult manga. Now, librarians will often tell you that graphic novels and comic are not all about superheroes, and that's true. But you can certainly find superhero books at our library, including books about one of the most beloved characters in all of pop culture. I'm going to show you what we have, a little bit of that. Right, I'm not going to show you everything because we'd be here all day. Right, so I'm going to show you from the B. So here we go. The Bat Collection at North Brunswick Public Library. Here's a picture of just a few shelves of our young adult library, the young adult graphic novel collection. And if you take a look here, you can see here the Batman books start. I'm not even including the Batgirl, but the Batman books start over here, and then over here, and then go down a whole other shelf, and then part of another shelf. So really, you could come to the library every week for a year and get out a different Batman book. And I'm not even including books like team books, like Justice League or The Outsiders or the big DC events that Batman will be in. Right, we're just looking at that. I'm going to take a look at also some of the books we have that show basically Batman through the years. All right, first we have Detective Comics. Detective Comics is the name of the comic book where Batman first appeared and continues to appear to this day. And this book has a really diverse diverse collection from the 1930s to the 21st century. So you can see how it's changed over time from the early years. It's funny because it has an early story with Robin, and it's a bit shocking how brutal Batman and Robin are when they're fighting villains. They don't care if the villains fight off a very high scaffolding to their death. They'll just laugh about it, right? So that's a very different from the way Batman is sometimes being portrayed more recently as someone who would never kill anybody. Okay. Also look at some of the Black Case book, and this has some of the odder stories. There were some really weird Batman stories through the years, and this is a lot from the mid 20th century. And Brave and Bold. This is really mostly from the 60s, and that's a lot of Batman team ups. And what's significant about this is that this has art by Neal Adams. Neal Adams is perhaps the most definitive Batman artist of the 20th century. And a lot of what he did, he collaborated with this writer who recently passed away, Dennis O'Neil. Right now, in the 1960s, there was a very silly TV show, Batman, where it was done in a very campy style, where Batman would be this ultra ridiculously by the rules kind of guy, and it was a lot of swagger, and the villains looked like they were having a great time, and a lot of people at DC Comics, including Dennis O'Neil and Neal Adams, sort of got away from that with much more serious stories. All right, they created Ra's al Ghul, who you may know from the more recent movies, as a villain worthy of Batman. All right, and Dennis O'Neil also wrote the adaptation of the movie Batman Returns and Batman Shaman, and this one's a personal favorite of mine, Batman Venom, where he becomes addicted to a drug. It could be seen as an analogy about steroids and drugs in general, but there's also like a lot of good, really good action in it. Right. And one of the most important writers and artists of Batman, especially in the 80s, was named Frank Miller. Frank Miller wrote and drew Batman: The Dark Knight Returns, and that went a lot of way to making Batman who he is thought of today as sort of this dangerous figure. And it's sort of set in this world where superheroes are outlawed. Of course, Batman is initially sort of living a sort of a normal life as Bruce Wayne, but of course, we know it's not too long before we'll see Batman again. And he also, wrote Batman Year One with illustrated but by David Mazzucchelli, and that was just about young Bruce Wayne trying to make it as Batman and making mistakes along the way. And that did a lot to sort of create the Batman world as we know it today. Much more recently, Frank Miller wrote All-Star Batman and Robin the Boy Wonder with pencils by Jim Lee. Honestly, it's not my favorite, but it's there if you like it. So anyhow, another important Batman book from the 80s, Batman the Killing Joke by Alan Moore and Brian Bullitt. Alan Moore himself is not crazy, says he's not crazy about this book, although he loved Brian Bullitt's art. This was the one where I think the Joker started to become a sympathetic character as well as a horrifying character. And there's an intriguing ending, right? It's sort of an ambiguous ending for a lot of people, and people will argue about what really happens at the end of the story. I'm not going to give anything away about that. You'd have to see for yourself. Now, in the 90s, a lot of superhero comics were all about big events, storylines that went across many titles. There was a famous Superman storyline where Superman apparently died in the 90s. Well, Batman returned that with Batman Nightfall. That's where Bane became a major player, and he completely changed the status quo of things for Batman, as well as the supporting cast. But the one that I really liked, this was a storyline going through Batman that actually got me into the Batman comics, was No Man's Land. And No Man's Land really has a 2020 feel to it, I'd say, the year 2020. It's what happens. There's an absolutely terrible earthquake that damages Gotham City, and the government doesn't do anything to help. So Gotham's on its own, and Batman is missing. Batman does show up in this book, but honestly, it's really an ensemble cast. If you like Commissioner Gordon, then you'll like a lot of this, because he definitely takes a big role in this book as well. And the storyline was actually adapted into a novel by one of the comics writers at the time, Greg Rucka, Batman No Man's Land. And that was fun because it sort of made one big storyline out of all the multiple little storylines that had been going on in No Man's Land. Okay, another writer who's had a very unusual effect on Batman is Grant Morrison. Now, Grant Morrison wrote this one, Arkham Asylum, right? And then, but after that, a lot of what he dealt with Batman was in JLA, the Justice League of America, which he wrote for a while, where Batman played an important role. But I'm going to look more at these 21st century things now. Batman and Son, which is what it sounds like. Batman meets a boy who claims to be his son. And Batman R.I.P. This is deals, and what came after was Batman and Robin, Batman Reborn, and Batman, The Return of Bruce Wayne. A lot of that came out of when Batman apparently dies. By the way, a lot of the storylines, especially particularly in Batman R.I.P., go back to some of the weirder ones that were collected in the Black Case book, which I mentioned earlier. Looking at the 21st century ones, a popular one was Hush, which introduced a new villain. Batman Detective Comics number 1000 has a lot of little stories that were written by different teams, and overall there's a focus on Batman may be a loner, but he has a family. I think that's one thing that I came away with that. All right, and while we're looking at that, at the idea of family, we have a lot of books about the supporting characters from Batman's world, such as Catwoman, Robin, Nightwing, Batgirl, of course, Batwoman. You may know her from the TV series. Gotham Central, about the police of Gotham, and Harley Quinn Breaking Glass, which I also did a video on earlier this year. So I think that you have a wide variety there. Of course, Batman, although he started out as comics, is not just comics. Right? You have YA authors like Marie Lu and Sarah J. Maas writing about Batman and Catwoman. And if you like resources, you can have the Essential Batman Encyclopedia and Batman Unauthorized, which was edited by Dennis O'Neil, but it's not an official DC book. Of course, Batman, of course, we know as also not just from the page, but from the screen. And we have the 80s and 90s movies like Batman, and we have the Dark Knight trilogy, beginning with Batman Begins, which for a lot of people showed like a more serious movie. You can have more serious movies dealing with Batman. We have Batman and Superman, part of the DC Extended Universe, and we have the Joker, right? Which was done really as a drama, more than an action movie. And we also have TV. We have Gotham, which was about Gotham while Bruce Wayne is still a boy and he's not yet Batman, and Officer Jim Gordon or Detective Jim Gordon takes an interest in him and as he develops. And we even have Titans, where we see Nightwing, who was formerly known as Robin, sort of keeping his distance from Batman in that sense. Right. In addition to those live actions, we have the animated ones, Batman versus Robin, right? The Lego Batman, Batman Mask of the Phantasm, and that came from the classic 1990s animated series Batman that a lot of people grew up with, and Batman Gotham Knight. We also have video games, right? I guess who wouldn't want to be Batman? Batman Arkham Knight, and Justice 2 for both PS4 and Xbox One. And so that's just a relatively short look at some of the Batman titles. I'd like to hear what are some of your favorite Batman titles. Also, what are some other characters you'd like me to look at or books that you'd like me to look at? Please let me know, and happy reading.